Hello my dear friends, today's video is going to be very fun. We're going to be exploring a theory surrounding what's going on in the depths of the unknown regions, what Moff Gideon and others are really up to. It might seem obvious where these projects lead, but I'm going to propose there is a twist along the way. The Snoke stuff is where it's headed, but I don't think it's going to be that simple. There are more stories along the way that John and Dave want to tell, things that also connect to Thrawn, a retelling of some things from the old expanded universe, and what they hinted at in the last episode. As you'll see in this theory, I think there's someone alive before Snoke, a character they might have based on Jorah C'baoth, a crazed clone from Mount Tantiss, a character who guarded the facility on Wayland, but later usurped Thrawn. I reckon the canon version of this is one who might usurp Gideon. The Remnant doesn't realise the monstrosity they've created, so let's dive straight into this. The Mandalorian Chapter 19 did a lot to further one of the most mysterious subplots of the show, the cloning of the Imperial Remnant that will eventually bring back Palpatine. In Dr. Pershing's speech to the New Republic, he talked about the work he did under the Empire, and how now he's turned a new leaf with the amnesty program. In the end, he was betrayed by Elia Kane, who was a double agent still working for Gideon, or so we assume. But it's what Pershing didn't say in the episode that speaks volumes. A couple of lines were deliberately ambiguous, and today I'm gonna investigate what they meant and try and find the truth behind the show's biggest mystery since season 1. So here's the conundrum. Pershing said so much, but yet did not reveal enough. All we know for sure is that he worked for Gideon and used Grogu's blood for what would eventually bring the Emperor back. But, as a few fans have noted, it seems as though there might be a twist, and notably, someone else involved. In Chapter 19, Pershing talks about being on the verge of a breakthrough, just as he was taken in by the New Republic, and now he wants to continue his projects, but the New Republic won't allow it. Now, as he mentioned in his speech, this involved using different strands of DNA and combining them to make a being with all the desirable properties. In this case, it was obvious he was referring to cloning Palpatine, but he never named him. He was talking about the so-called Snoke clones we saw in Season 2, Chapter 12, but he also notes he did it on behalf of a quote, desperate individual who was giving the orders and presumably pulling the strings. Now when you really think about it, this suddenly makes so many fan theories and assumptions about the cloning program so much less clear. Because while it's true that Gideon was Pershing's immediate employee before he defected, Gideon doesn't seem like the desperate individual Pershing is talking about. Why would the creators on the show use these words specifically? Think about it. Gideon is a Palpatine loyalist with his own personal goals, one of which is to clone the deceased Emperor. But surely Gideon is not the desperate one in this situation, but rather Palpatine himself, who at this stage is still dead, but by the time of the sequels, he was controlling Snoke, and his life essence was passed on to a clone body. But what if his presence is alive right now, in Snoke, or a proto-Snoke? What if there were multiple prototypes along the way, and it just so happens that before Snoke, those failed him? What if this embodiment of the Emperor's life force is the one running the projects behind the scenes, and using the Remnant and the Sith Eternal to bring him back properly? I only say this because I can't see how Gideon is the desperate one in this situation, and the same thing goes for the client in Season 1. These Imperials who want Palpatine back to reinstate order are acting out of service, not desperation, unless they're restricted by time. They need this to happen sooner rather than later. As we saw in Season 2, we know that Gideon really pushed Pershing, so it is possible he did just mean Gideon, but it's worth bearing in mind the wording might have been deliberate. But we do hear Snoke's theme and Palpatine's teachings a couple of times in the episode. Same as in Chapter 12, it's all connected. And there is evidence 30 years down the timeline that Palpatine in some form or vessel was the one responsible for his own return. In the Rise of Skywalker, he tells Kylo Ren,
I made Snoke.
I made Snoke. And given Dave Filoni's acknowledgement of the film the other day, I reckon he's using this time period between trilogies to make it make sense. I think this character behind the scenes, a proto-Palpatine, is the one who's going to cast Gideon aside, the same way Jorah C'baoth cast Thrawn aside in Legends. But here's another question. If Pershing, before he had his mind flayed, was trying to do the right thing and turn a new leaf, why did he not just name Palpatine in public? Just unveil what he worked on with the Remnant? Well, the way I see it, there are two possibilities here. Either Pershing knew this would lead the New Republic to panic, or he knew how bad that would sound, and if he's trying to get in their good books, he probably shouldn't mention the fact he worked on bringing back their enemy, the most evil and monstrous man the galaxy ever knew. Even the name Palpatine brings so much shock. so he probably did it for career reasons, unless of course he had doubts, but I don't think so. I reckon he genuinely wanted to start over. But on the other hand, you could argue that if Pershing really wants the New Republic to trust him, telling them that somehow Palpatine is going to return is definitely going to get their attention. Now Chapter 19, The Convert, paints Pershing as an innocent but misguided scientist, almost mad you might say, who was obsessed with his research even though it was purely evil. I think deep down he genuinely wanted to help the New Republic with his research, even though they were iffy on what that would entail, but they're leaving so much up in the air because a lot is going to be explored later on. They're not revealing everything at this stage. At the end of the episode, before we cut back to Bo and Din, the Coruscant portion ends with Pershing being framed and getting parts of his memory wiped by a mind flayer, something Katie O'Brien's character Elia Kane cranks all the way up. Now we know she only needed Pershing to identify the equipment to give to Gideon, but why does she need his mind cleared? Why does Gideon need his mind cleared? It's not as if it's to keep him from telling the New Republic that she made him do it, because he already tried to tell them. They would not listen, so it's not that. Is it just sadistic? Maybe, but I reckon there's a deeper meaning. She cranked up the dial to try and erase more memories than needed. Does he know something about the cloning project that Kane is making sure he never talks about? When Kane betrays Pershing, he asks her, "Why did you set me up?" Which in itself is a very tantalizing question. If Pershing was going to spill the beans, he would have done it by now. What else does he know, and why silence him so brutally? So what was once a pretty straightforward canon theory is now made more interesting. Are there more connections still to be made? Is it not as simple as just Gideon? I definitely think something else is at play, and Katie O'Brien herself has teased on Twitter that who Elia Kane works for is something maybe not as obvious as we thought. The Imperial Remnant is much bigger than just Gideon, and while everyone's favourite Moff is definitely part of it, there is something more, something bigger we're going to find out about in the next few weeks. Could she have taken the items needed from the lab straight to Exegol? Could the connections to the Rise of Skywalker begin this early? Dave Filoni admitted the other day he's got Episode 9 in mind when they make everything to do with this project. What the Imperial Remnant's project is leading to. And a further question, when the Remnant finally has all of the DNA they need, what is the mix of characters that entails? Did they get enough of Grogu's blood? Pershing said in Season 2 they need more, but that would kill him, and after the rescue, I'm gonna guess no. But in the Vader comics there are other sources. There's Luke's hand from The Empire Strikes Back, which was being used on Exegol, and I wonder who else they might have utilised. Maybe Omega from the Bad Batch, or Crosshair, or both. Could the cloning project from The Mandalorian draw inspiration from the Thrawn trilogy, or maybe the Dark Empire comics, when Palpatine returns? In those comics there's more reference to Palpatine's vessel, the body he needs. He tells Luke, "You see my friend, flesh does not easily support this great power." At this stage, my dear friends, it seems as though there are many unknowns. Time will tell, let's see how it all plays out. But there is some good news. We're going to get many more answers than we have done for the first 2 seasons. This much is clear from the way the season's been set up, but also how it plays into other spin-offs like the Ahsoka show and Skeleton Crew. And when I spoke with Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, he teased we definitely get some answers. They might not be the most satisfying, but things are definitely moving along. And Giancarlo Esposito has said in the past, we are going to understand Gideon's motivation so much better, because right now we have tons of questions. So fingers crossed, but as I said in yesterday's video, the next episode is about Grogu. So share your thoughts in the comments down below. Who do you think Pershing was working for? Is there more to Gideon's project? And is there a big bad behind Gideon? Is Elia Kane part of a larger network? If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and why not check out our Patreon? The link is down there in the description, and you get tons of videos that are not found here on YouTube. But until the next one, my dear friends, may the Force be with you always.